Hello and welcome to Two Girls in a Pod. I am Sharon,
I'm Christy.
and we are super excited as always when we get to have guests on. Today we have Lawrence. And one of the reasons we wanted to have Lawrence on is because, oftentimes we talk about not issues with women, but a lot of women things. But we like to mix it up, and we do like to bring in the male perspective because when men are involved in relationships or in business, I think people have an idea of what that looks like. But it's always nice to hear somebody else's story because you've been married for how long now?
Almost 18 years
Okay, so once or twice around the block with her.
with this one. Yeah.
Oh, we'll get into that. And a business owner for how long?
15 years.
Okay, so there was a lot of stuff going on in a short period of time with you.
My whole life, it seems.
Okay, so let's start with where are you from? Because you're in Springs, but this isn't where you're originally from.
Well, no, I was born in San Antonio, Texas, but my dad moved the family here when I was in like third grade.
Okay.
So I essentially grew up in Colorado Springs from third grade to currently.
Okay. So you kind of started to establish yourself here. You're more a Coloradoan then, is what I'm hearing.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we got that right, cleared up. Some people say, where they're from. I'm still that person. No, you're not. Not when you moved to Colorado.
No, Colorado's home.
Okay.
Most of my family's in Texas,
Oh, okay.
but I know very little about the state, the city that I was born. I'm only close to one cousin, to be truthful,
Okay.
and he's super special to me. His name is Randy.
Okay. So was school an important thing for you? Was that like something that you thought going to school, I'm going to go to school and become a business owner? Or was that?
No, actually, when I was in high school, I never thought I would be going to college.
Oh, okay.
As a matter of fact, when I graduated high school from Mitchell, by the way, I didn't go to college. Actually, I went to Pikes Peak Community College for a year. I didn't like it, dropped out, and just started working. It wasn't until my 30s that I decided, you know what? Let me just get my degree. So I have two associate's degrees. One of them is, I went to school for travel and tourism,
Oh, okay.
and that was at Blair Junior College.
Oh, wow.
I got an associate's degree, started working for United Airlines. The airline industry was fun. Went to a lot of places.
Oh,
I liked what I was doing. I eventually became a ramp trainer. So let's say you two girls were hired. You would come into my class. I teach you ramp safety, FAA regulations. We'd go out to the airport and I'd introduce you to the aircraft, the staff management at the airport. It was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But then United went into bankruptcy. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
And so a lot of people started losing their jobs. I was there about 13 years and my number finally came up and I got furloughed. We all got furloughed.
Mm-hmm.
What does furlough mean? Well, being in the union, they're firing you essentially, but there's a chance they're going to bring you back. If they bring you back, you still have your seniority, which affects your pay, vacations, sick time, all of that stuff. And that was good for 6 years. Well, I did get a call and they wanted me to go to Dulles Airport in DC.
Oh.
And I said, no, thanks.
You wanted to stay?
Well, so I had already gone, I was in court fighting for my two kids. At that time, they were 3 and 4 years old. And that was, man, going through a divorce situation is horrible.
Okay.
But then when you have toddlers, it's that much more difficult. And so I had to make a lot of life-altering decisions. I used to live in Denver. Well, the courts here in Colorado Springs said, as long as you live in Denver, you're only going to see your kids every other weekend, unless you move to El Paso County. Well, I was already losing my job with United. So I decided this is the perfect time. I came back to Colorado Springs. And sure enough, I got more time with my kids, and they are 27 and 28 years old today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not, and look at you spending it with us.
Talking about them.
For you, the changes you made at that point were more about your personal life and not your professional life.
Yes. And so I had to make a decision. I was losing my job. I had a 2-year degree in travel and tourism. I decided, What am I going to do? I was like stressed out. Keep in mind, I'm fighting in court for my boys.
Mhm.
I'm losing my job. I'm really stressed out. I'm really worried. A lot's going on. To be totally honest with your followers, I mean, I actually went into a depression,
Mhm.
and because of all the stress, all the overload in my mind, and I didn't know how to process it. And so I went into therapy.
Mhm.
My primary physician sent me to a psychologist, and that psychologist said, "Yeah, you need to be on meds."
Mhm.
So that was a little journey because you try different things and it either works or it doesn't. And so I went through months of trying different meds until I found the right one.
Yeah. Mhm.
So that whole thing was super difficult. And at the same time, I needed to figure out, well, what am I going to do next? So here's the really interesting part. So the young lady who I was kind of sort of dating, she was the sweetest woman. Now we're going to, at some stage, we're going to talk about my life, growing up as a young man and different types of relationships I've been in and out of. But the young lady I'm talking about right now is the woman that I ended up marrying. And it's been nearly 18 years. So that's been,
And it's kind of interesting because, Lawrence, so much of the time I think that people, and particularly men, have a more difficult time talking about those kind of things of, oh my God, I was at a place where I really didn't know what I was doing. I had no direction. I went into a depression. I got on medications. Do you find even in your life that men are not as forthcoming with that information, or do you find that as time has gone on that more men are sharing these things?
that's a great question. So I have three siblings.
Hmm.
So there was four of us. My mom and dad had four. So growing up, now my oldest brother is 7 years older than I am. My
Hmm.
sister's 5 years older than me. My younger brother is 2 years younger than me. So to this day, my bond is strongest with my younger brother because we're closer in age.
Hmm.
I love them all,
Hmm.
but my younger brother, I just adore. And I don't want that to sound bad because I love my all
No,
of my brothers and sisters.
but I think what people don't understand is when you're in a family system, you usually have a closer relationship to those that are closer in age because you share more in common with them.
Right.
So your bond is a little bit different.
Yeah.
It definitely isn't the lack. My oldest sister is 17 years older than me. So I understand
Yeah.
that you just don't know them as well because they're off living their life and doing their things. So it's a little
Exactly.
bit different.
Yeah, my
Absolutely.
my my oldest brother had graduated, moved out of the house by the time I even got into high school. So I agree with you with that. But I decided to share my life experience on this podcast in part because my dad was the provider.
Hmm.
My dad is a retired executive chef. So he worked for a lot of different hotels as we were growing up. The one thing that I appreciate, there's a lot about my dad that I appreciate, but the one thing that I'm really thankful for is the work ethic that he instilled in me.
Yes.
Because of that work ethic, it's helped me to sustain my business for 15 years. I'm not a quitter at anything. So that helped me keep striving year after year. I mean, when you open up a business, day one, that's a lot of pressure
Hmm.
because you have no clients. Your name isn't out there. And so fast forward to today, I am like super blessed.
Hmm.
I have a great support staff. There's a lot of different personalities. So this journey that we call life, I mean, I didn't always have these tools to learn how to deal with different personalities. Even though when you're in college, you take a lot of different courses, psychology,
Hmm.
how to speak in front of others, math, all the basic stuff. So, I mean, I have the education, but it's just an undergrad degree. It's not like I went for a master's or above that. My upbringing was different because, as I mentioned, my dad was a provider.
Hmm.
He wasn't always home at nighttime. He wasn't always available on holidays because being a chef, you have to be working.
Those are busy times.
My dad wasn't the kind of parent where I can approach him and say, Dad, this is what's going on with me. How did you experience it? I mean, he's 88 years old today. So imagine back then.
Exactly.
I don't think men in his generation knew how to guide their young sons. I mean, he did as far as teaching me how to work. And I started working for him when I was 14, which I loved.
And I think that's a good point right there. Is oftentimes I think that we can be hard on parents, but when we start to look at the fact that, they were providing and so they weren't always available. And I think when you look historically, parenting was done more like as a role modeling thing. So they were showing you this is what you do, and you kind of went and you did it.
Mhm.
So you developed this worth ethic. But I do agree that sometimes the emotional piece of it, of being a man growing up with a male like that, is they're doing the best they can. But their thing is more, you got to eat, we got to have a home, we got to have these things. So that emotional component isn't necessarily there in the same way.
Right. And so you fast forward to today and my decision to come and talk about my experiences, failed relationships from a teenager to my adulthood. I just thought, why not share what I've been through? There's men and women out there, obviously, who we've been programmed, and I'm including myself, where we're told every day, you're never going to find someone who loves you with 2 kids. You're never going to find this, you're never going to find that, but you have all of those things in me.
Mhm.
And so at first, when the previous girlfriend, I mean, she really cared for me, but the way she was so insecure with herself that she would project those insecurities onto me. And then it's true that I started thinking, wow, she's right. I have 2 boys, they're toddlers. At that time, they were, yeah, 2 and 3.
Mhm.
And I started to believe it. And she was nice. And, there was a lot about her that attracted me. That's why she was my girlfriend. But she started to make me believe that I wasn't worthy to look for something else. There was a lot of problems that she brought into the relationship. I kind of just accepted it's kind of part of being.
That would have to create doubt in your mind. So did that then shift? Well, if I can't find anybody, then I'll just play the field, or I can't, or that insecurity of I just don't look.
Well, it got to the point because this was all at the airport,
Mhm.
DIA. So as a trainer, I would meet a lot of different people
Mhm.
before they actually went out to the airport because the training facility was in a hotel off-site
Mhm.
of DIA. So these people would spend 2 or 3 weeks with me
Mhm.
before we went out to the airport. So we had established some sort of bond. This is with men and women.
Mhm.
So my girlfriend actually worked at the airport. So when I finally was out there with this new class and she saw one of my students who she was threatened by, I always refer to that as like she was the hen pecking away at everyone around her chick. And I was the chick.
Mhm.
I was her little chick. And that's how I felt. So I started feeling smothered. Like, I can't even talk to this person. She's asking me about ramp safety or something related to the job. And she was so insecure, she would shoo him away. And that wasn't a good thing to happen when you were the trainer.
Exactly.
So that started opening my eyes like, no, this isn't healthy. There were other things that I knew weren't healthy, but that was too much. She crossed the line at that point. So the more she decided to cross that line further and further into my space, she was actually pushing me away.
Okay.
And so I decided at some point, well, enough's enough. It was never physical, but we did have a lot of arguments because when someone's smothering you with their insecurities, I mean, you can only take so much. And I'm a claustrophobic person anyway. So imagine how I felt emotionally,
Oh,
like trapped.
that's actually a really good way of putting it for people to understand that feeling of being closed in. And, we often talk about that, I think, on a physical level, but it's almost a little more scary in a way on an emotional level, because on a physical level, you can find the door, you can find the opening very quickly. But I think when you're in those emotional things, it's a more of a gradual progression. So you don't even know you're at the claustrophobic state until you're at the claustrophobic state.
Yeah. So getting back to my father, a great supporter. He had me and my younger brother in sports all of our childhood. When I got to be a certain age, 16, I became interested in girls at school, so I was less interested in sports. And that's where I started to develop personal relationships.
Mhm.
Besides a buddy, I became interested in girls and then chasing them. I mean, all that was fun, when you're a teenager and
Mm.
you dip your toe in the water. It's nice and warm. You want to jump in. So you moving forward as I grew, I entered some relationships with great young ladies, and my aunt and uncle opened up a restaurant. It was over there by the Citadel. It was called Crystal's Fine Dining.
Mhm.
And I started working there when I was 19. And I met this woman who was separated from her husband. And man, she came on strong. And she knew what she was doing. She knew what she wanted.
Mhm.
And I was 19, turning 20.
Mhm.
She was 27. And she was giving me a lot of this attention.
Mhm.
Now I'm in my early or late teens,
Mhm.
and this has never happened before. Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
This woman who's really pretty, older, experienced, is
Likes you.
likes me. And so that I actually broke someone's heart. She was like 18. I was 19, almost 20. Broke her heart. She was the sweetest girlfriend at that time. And I didn't think twice. It was like, I don't know, a brand new shiny sports car. If I can compare it to something from a young man's perspective, and she was fast, and then I learned the hard way that she had an agenda.
Mhm.
And being a married woman with a 5-year-old daughter, and her ex-husband was an officer in the Army, she's been around the world with him. I never been out of Colorado Springs. So I was in for a ride, an emotional ride. And so, man, it made me dizzy. When I think about it, I'm thinking, and to be honest to you and to your listeners, like millions of people out there, I was manipulated. I didn't know what was going on. And because of her, I didn't trust women anymore. I mean, it was a really, really bad situation. And you don't know what's going on until you're out of that situation. So it took me years where I was one of these dudes who would have fun with women. And as soon as they would say, I'm catching feelings for you, or even I love you, it was time for me to go. Because I wasn't ready for that. I mean, I just experienced years of being manipulated and lied to.
Well, and I think, those become those defense mechanisms that people develop, because it's like, I still want to engage, but I'm going to engage to where I'm not going to be hurt
Yeah.
or manipulated or whatever that is.
Right. I guess the only thing I can say about all those other relationships afterwards is I did say to everyone, I'm not looking for a relationship.
Mhm.
If you want to hang out, whatever, that's cool, but I'm not ready.
Mhm.
And they knew my situation. But another thing I've learned about women and maybe people is that they think that they're the answer. They think, I understand where you came from. I've experienced something, so I can help you. I can change how you feel. And I'm saying, okay, let's see.
Mhm.
Well, and I think the thing is that I think a lot of times in those cases, people go into that savior mode.
Yeah.
Maybe if other people couldn't love you this way, but I can love you this way. We often see that, whenever we're looking at those kind of really toxic relationships, is that person thinking, I can save this person from themselves. And at some point, you realized, I'm sure, because you of where you are now, that nobody could save you. You had to make some kind of changes. So, what happened that personally, what was that pivotal moment for you where you realized, no, I got to change. This isn't the life I want. I'd rather have something else.
Oh, that took years later,
Mm-hmm.
years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, keep in mind, during this period, I decided, I don't know, I was in 23. I decided, well, let's get back into school. So I went to Blair Junior College, was studying again. I was just focused on school.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I had these issues with relationships, because I was embedded inside already,
Mm-hmm.
the damage was already done. I still had goals for myself my whole life. I haven't let any particular thing stop me. Yeah, I went through a depression. I lost my job with United. I was supporting my kids with that income. I had my own place, the usual stuff that people are going through today with this new administration and losing their jobs. But getting to me, it's not like I had no purpose. I never felt that way.
Okay.
Mhm.
I kept moving forward. But when it came to relationships, I had walls. I had boundaries for myself. And I wasn't interested in having a girlfriend. I was interested in having fun,
Mhm.
going to
Mhm.
clubs, hanging out. Never been the kind of personality that needed to be around a whole lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Even in high school, I knew a lot of people in high school and had a group of friends, but it's not like I had to be with them
Yeah.
even after school
Mhm.
or on the weekends. Because on the weekends, remember, I worked for my dad.
Mm-hmm.
He would take me to work with him and I made money. So I'm an independent thinker. I'm fine in my own space. In fact, I cherish time by myself to read, or I've learned to meditate fairly recently. And I was getting really good at that, and I need to get back to that. But I like my alone time. I have hobbies that I like to do, which is by myself, even if that means playing Madden, just my own space.
Yeah.
Again, I know I'm jumping around. When it comes to my kids or my stepson, I've always been there for them. What does that mean? It means I would take him to the park. I would chase him around the playground. We took him to Disney World a couple of times, Disneyland, Universal City. We've taken him snowboarding. I did things with my kids and my wife that I never experienced as a child.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I experienced them as a teenager, but not as a child.
Okay.
And that goes back to what my dad did. He was a
Mhm.
chef. He was always working.
Yeah.
To this day, I'm really close to my mom. I haven't mentioned her until now. But when we lived in Texas and I was like in third grade, that's what, 8 years old or so?
Mhm.
I was in Cub Scouts. And usually you have like your den leaders, your dad,
Mhm.
but she was my den mother. She was all for my troop.
Mhm.
And that was awesome, because my dad had moved to Colorado Springs.
Mhm.
So as he was establishing his career and getting things prepared for us, we were in Texas for like, I don't know, 2 years.
Mhm.
It took some time.
Yeah.
I don't remember my dad that much growing up in the short time in Texas.
Yeah.
It was just my mom. So when we moved to Colorado, my mom was still the stay-at-home parent. She was the nurturer, but she was also the disciplinarian. I grew up with that thick belt,
Mhm.
just the threat of a belt.
Yeah.
There was no spanking with the hand,
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
not in my culture.
Right.
So
Neither.
for the most part, yeah, we were good kids.
Mhm.
Like I said, I have two brothers. All three of us were in sports.
Mhm.
So I kind of made sure that my kids were also in sports.
So your mom's kind of the one who kind of provided more of that nurturing, which is common, but I think it's kind of interesting that when you can combine the nurturing of that, but also not that your dad did anything wrong in that aspect. He was just doing what he was expected to do at that time. So you kind of did the opposite of that, of I want to have this engagement with my kids.
Right. Well, it's a different era
Absolutely.
from when my dad was my age. A matter of fact, I often say this today. Part of what I do for myself, part of my me time is I like to exercise.
Hmm.
I'm never going to be big.
Hmm.
I'm always going to be fit.
Hmm.
And that includes my heart and my health. So I take care of myself. I try to take care of myself. I try to eat right. I try to get enough sleep. I definitely exercise. And I think, because my dad's 88, he's diabetic, which came with age. I remember when I was in elementary school, my dad taught me how to pack his pipe with tobacco,
Hmm.
how to clean it with the filter, the whole thing.
Wow.
I remember,
Skills.
yeah, when I was in 5th grade, my dad said he would call me Larry Boy, although I prefer Lawrence. He called me Larry Boy. Larry Boy, go get me another beer. His favorite was Budweiser. And so, heck, I remember those cans, you had to pop them and pull the tab. And then after that, you had those little siphon holes. You just
Mhm.
push them in. Anyway, that's how my dad grew up. So I thought, I wonder if fitness centers, which they're everywhere today, but they weren't
Oh, no.
at his age.
Well, no, because their fitness was really more physical. They did more physical work normally.
But they also smoked in the home, whether it's cigarettes, pipes, or cigars.
Oh, yeah.
And my dad had a pipe caddy. I remember my uncle also had a smoke pipes in his house, and he lived north of Colorado Springs. And so that's how I grew up. That's what I was used to. There was ashtrays on the coffee table.
It was funny because, there's that meme out there that, if you grew up at this time and, in pottery or ceramic class, the big thing was to make an ashtray for your, who does that?
I remember that. I
You made the
remember
best ashtray ever.
that. Yeah, so it's a different era.
It is.
My kids would tell you that I would take them to the park, any park, and they'd have the jungle gym. I don't remember as a kid they had jungle gyms, but they're everywhere, even McDonald's, right? So I would take them and I would chase them, and then soon all the other kids that were at the park would join in,
Mhm.
and I was the only parent chasing them, and I loved it.
I think sometimes you just have to tap into your youthful side. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm still in touch with the little boy inside of me.
I'm in touch with mine too, and Christy often tells me what grow up. No, no, she doesn't. Because sometimes you could, yeah, I think
Well, it's easy. Well, the fact of that matter is it's easy to get stressed out over what's happening in everyday life.
Mhm.
And I mentioned just a little bit ago that people are losing their jobs in part because of this administration. I'm not going to get into politics,
Yeah,
but it's part of everyday life
exactly.
where there's stressors out there. And I went through my stressor when United went into bankruptcy. They were trying to save money. So they asked the employees, the union, hey, are you willing to take a pay cut? Can you give some of your sick time back? Can you give some of your vacation time back? We promise you're going to get it all back once we get out of bankruptcy. But in the interim,
You
we'll
still
do
have
this.
to, and I think the thing is that understanding that as much as you'd like to help out the company, that's not helping out your family. So I get why oftentimes you have to make different decisions.
Mhm.
But I want to get back to your relationships and when did that change for you? Because obviously you're not still doing that because you've been with your wife now for
Nearly 18
18
years.
years.
So we've been together when I think about when we actually started dating and the trials and tribulations of dating, we've been together 24 years.
Okay. So does that
So
mean you're a
okay,
slow
so
learner?
so my stepson
Hmm.
and my son, they're 5 months apart. So John was 2.
Hmm.
So Armand was about 18 months. and they're 27 now.
Wow.
So
That's a-
25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
25 years. So what was my wake-up call? When did that light go off above my head?
Yeah.
So I realized, now keep in mind, I was in emotional turmoil. And then you mix the fact that I'm going to lose my job
Mm-hmm.
and all the challenges of losing your job financially. I had all that in my head. And I had this person who's now my wife. Her name is Parissa.
Mm-hmm.
And she was always there for me. She knew I had to end things with my girlfriend. She was just my friend. She knew, but everyone at the airport knew because the mother hen made herself known. That's mine,
Mm-hmm.
right? So everyone knew. But as I was going this emotional roller coaster and this emotional dive into the deep, she was always there for me, like as a friend.
Mm-hmm.
I was psychologically, I was deep in a depression because how do you manage all these things, all these emotional things? You know, when you have two kids that you're fighting in court for. So you have your attorney's fees,
Mm-hmm.
court fees, child support. It got to the point where I had to take them to children's psychologist
Mm-hmm.
because then there's this, even though you're not supposed to talk about your mom or talk about the dad to the child,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to happen. And it got to the point where, keep this in mind, when my kids would come to me and they would have to talk to their mom, my younger son, John, said, "Can I call you Larry?" I said, "No, I'm your dad." Okay. Well, my dad said, so in her household, I was Larry.
Wow. Okay.
The stepdad was daddy.
Mm.
So I never put that pressure on my boys that Parissa is your mom. To this day, they call her Parissa.
Mm-hmm.
We're okay with that. There was just a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot going on. Getting back to Parissa, she was my friend. And even though I was like, I felt like I was drowning with everything in my head, I realized it was like all of a sudden, this realization just, I was enlightened. I don't know how it happened. I was just enlightened that, oh my God, I have this incredible woman who's there for me all the time. It doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter that I'm going through this kind of breakup with this other person,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something physical there that I'm drawn to. But the emotional part, it was already broken. The trust was already broken,
Mm-hmm.
but there was still that physical connection. And I realized, so what about that? So what? I cut ties because I realized Parissa is everything. She's everything that I want. She's loyal. She's a hard worker.
Mm-hmm.
She's devoted. She's an incredible mom to her own son. She's an incredible mother figure to my kids. And she's supported me emotionally, even when I was like crying or angry,
Yeah.
frustrated, whatever my emotion was at the time, she was there. And even if I kind of fed her some of my negative energy,
Mm-hmm.
she didn't take it personal. She understood. She's been divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And even her divorce, that whole situation, if we talk about it, it actually turns out really awesome. But she's the reason that I decided I don't want to live this way anymore. I don't want to not trust. I don't want to continue to guard my emotions. Not everyone's a liar. Not everyone's a cheater. Not everyone's out for something.
Mm-hmm.
There are people out there who just want to love
Mm-hmm.
and be loved,
Exactly.
like sincerely.
Yeah.
Now, at this stage, I was already in my mid 30s. I'm 59 today. So it's not been an easy journey for me, like
Mhm.
with relationships. But for those people out there, you can't forever hold on to those bad experiences. Maybe your experience is being slapped around, kicked out of the house, then called names, whatever. Maybe there are issues that you do have. Maybe you are an alcoholic. Maybe there are drug dependency issues that they should get help for. But that's not the end all.
Exactly.
I mean, with counseling. Now, when it comes to counseling, I did learn not every counselor is a good counselor.
Absolutely no. You got to find the right one.
You have to find the right one. Not everyone, just because they have a psychology degree, they're licensed with the state and they're whatever. That doesn't mean they have all the answers. They could teach you the tools, but at the end of the day, you have to be comfortable with the person that you're opening up to,
Mhm.
and you know that they're listening without judging you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then, and it might take a few weeks
Yeah.
for you to realize that. My experience with one, without really knowing me or my background, she mentioned my mother, and I'm thinking, what? I mean, the suggestion that the reason I was where I was emotionally was because I had mommy issues. And she said that in a roundabout way. And I thought, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. And
Next.
so that was the last day I went. So not everyone is good,
Mhm.
but there are exceptional counselors out there.
Absolutely.
You have to find the right one.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
And so our audience knows Parissa because we had her on our show. And so they know about her journey and, her Salon Bella, which is a fabulous place to go to. It really is. Not that she just does a beautiful job, but it's the atmosphere there. So the creation of all that. So you both are very successful in business. How do you guys do that as a collaboration? How do you guys manage those things? Because running businesses takes a lot of time. Takes a lot of time, a lot of effort.
Okay, so Parissa, she's a go-getter. So she's an Aries, and they don't need pep talk from someone else. She is driven. I think that's a common characteristic of an Aries. They're driven, they're ambitious, they have the energy, and they have these concepts in their head that they put into practice
Mhm.
and they make it work. I'm a Cancer. I'm a very emotional person. I'm in touch with my feelings. I've said recently that the person you see in me is sincere.
Mhm.
They're raw and they're authentic. So when I'm angry, there's something really
Yeah.
bothering me. When I allow someone into my little emotional circle, it's sincere.
Mhm.
Right.
And I'm going to give you my friendship. Just people have to know that about me. And if people want to try to test what sincere means versus what they can get away with
Yeah.
or push the boundaries of my friendship or
Yeah.
my generosity, I'm going to see that. We all do eventually.
Mhm.
And that's where I cut it off. If I cut someone off, to me, I have a reason for it.
Let's
I just want to move
through
on.
on your boundaries.
So
Yeah.
when it comes to our businesses, I stay in my lane when it comes to the salon because I know nothing of that service.
Mhm.
I'll listen to how her day was. If she needs things done at the salon that I'm capable of doing, I'll do those tasks for her. When it comes to my business, it's kind of niche
Mhm.
business. I provide 2 services. I install, repair, inspect fire suppression systems for commercial kitchens, but then we also provide hood cleaning services. So a lot of times I work at night,
Mhm.
in the middle of the night. Well, in the beginning, I've been open 15 years. Wow.
Wow.
So business, I'm blessed. We're both super blessed. we get to do pretty much a lot of things in life, but our personalities are so different. I don't think that her personality would go over too well with my job because my job is very blue collar.
Mhm.
And so, what does that mean? It means to me, you don't have to have a college degree,
Mhm.
even though I have one in criminal justice. And I used that degree for 4 years
Mhm.
in probation. But what I do now, I would not want to wear a shirt and tie and a jacket ever again.
Mm.
Well, what's really interesting is everything you've talked about that you've done in your life, none of it has to do with what you do, your business. How did you go from, say, working in a criminal justice to now you own a business that does something totally blue collar and totally different?
Well, I mean, if you think about blue collar, even working on the ramp for an airline is blue collar.
Yeah,
It's all physical.
yeah.
It's just labor intensive work. You're driving someone else's luggage from one aircraft to the next. You're loading it onto the plane, taking it off the plane, stuff like that. So what I do now, I mean, so when I was working in probation, we'd have to go to court. We'd have to wear a suit
Mhm.
and we'd have to either request that this client be released from probation because they completed everything and they've
Mhm,
been on probation at least half of the sentence, or they're non-compliant,
mhm,
they refuse to comply with the agreement of probation, and they should go to jail.
Mm.
So the problem that I started to have, like at year 4, is I was just tired of babysitting people who agreed, okay, instead of going to jail, I'll go on probation. Fine. But then they don't want to comply. And then they give you a ton of excuses
Mm.
as to why they're not going to AA or NA
or
or
getting their drug test done like they're supposed to, or
even showing up for a regular appointment.
Right.
I don't have a ride. There's so many. I just got tired of it.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, I've been open for 15 years. That means I was open for business before I even finished college, before I got a job in probation. And so every year I saw that I was getting more clients than the year before,
Mm.
than the year before that, the year before that. And fast forward, I mean, I have 5 country clubs, I have a couple of hospitals, I have a plethora of restaurants, mom and pop, chain.
Mhm,
I'm on Fort Carson probably 50 times a year. I'm just blessed.
mhm.
I'm super blessed. So I use some of my education and some of the training I received throughout my whole life, the tools I've kind of gained in life on how to deal with different personalities at work.
Mhm.
And I work with all men. And men, the testosterone kicks in at some point when we're having a bad day and now you're rubbing me wrong and now I'm getting angry. So that does happen. So then I need to figure out how to navigate and bring the blood temperature down, don't be stressing out so much. And that's where meetings comes in, one-on-one meetings. It could be stressful.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess, it's kind of like when we look back on life and there are so many of those pivotal moments that we have. And it sounds like for you personally, your pivotal moment was the realization that Parissa was actually there in those times of need.
Mhm.
And the friendship is what was your foundation anyway. And then at some point with the business, it was transitioning from doing a job like probation where or work any just kind of the burnout of it and saying to yourself at some point, I don't need to do this anymore.
And it sounds like the current business kind of just grew organically, like through word of mouth, or
So I had mentioned earlier the dynamics of Chris's ex-husband. Okay, so here we go. So Carissa was married for like 5 years. They had one son together who I met at age 18 months. He's an incredible young man. I love him like my own son, truly. So when I lost my job with United, I was in that horrible emotional state, but I still needed to make money. And so there was a period where Mike owned a hood cleaning company in Denver. And so we always need help.
Mhm.
It's hard in any industry to find good, reliable people who want to work. So Carissa asked Mike, hey, unfortunately Larry lost his job. And Mike knew a lot of people with United too. We all lost our jobs, a lot of us. So Mike said, yeah, I'll use them. And so I never knew there was such a thing as hood cleaning.
Mhm.
We don't think about these kind of jobs.
No.
It put some money in my pocket. I could pay some bills. And then I was learning a lot. Well, when the court in Colorado Springs said, as long as you live in Denver, you're only going to see your kids every other weekend unless you move back. That's when I decided I'm going back to Colorado Springs. So I told Mike, unfortunately, I have to leave for my kid. And he knew my kids because Armand
Mhm.
and my kids
Yeah.
had a relationship. He was incredible. I owe all of my success in this career from Carissa's ex-husband, Mike, who has since passed away from cancer. Everything I owe to Mike. Yeah, I have the work ethic. I have the drive. 15 years is a long time for any career,
Absolutely.
but he's the one who gave me the tools. He's the one who taught me. And so he did fire system installations, hood installations. I went countless jobs with him. So that's how I get introduced to this job. When I started my own company, as typical, the first 2 years out the gate was pretty challenging
Mhm.
because you've already invested money in vans and equipment and in office space, etc. So you have to make money to pay those debts off. And even when those were paid off, I did not like what I was doing because I went from a suit and tie, dealing with people in an office, appearing before a judge. I thought all that was pretty cool until it wasn't cool anymore. But my business was already
Yeah.
growing. It was growing every year.
Yeah.
So I decided I'm done working for someone else. So working for yourself, there's nothing better,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
I'm going to agree.
But you have to have the mindset that everything is on your shoulders. Keeping your guys busy so they can support their families, it's on my shoulders. Well, what does that mean? It means I have to go out and continuously get new clients. Because like any business, you gain clientele and you lose clientele
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Well, and I think, like, so as we get ready to recap everything, it sounds like it's kind of been one of those kind of up and downs for you, but it sounds like you're finally at that up and it's kind of been sustained now, much more so than in the past.
Well, in terms of my personal relationships, it's been all up.
Okay.
There's been no ups and downs. Yeah, of course, you get in arguments with your.
No, but yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. It's not, there's no plummeting, there's no.
If it were a stock market, the graph would be going up with little bumps, but no dips.
Yeah.
A dip to me is a divorce or separation.
Yeah.
There's none of that. When it comes to my business, it's the same thing. The graph goes up with little dips, but it's never been
Right.
down.
Yeah.
Well, and none of that could happen if you didn't at some time in your life make some conscious choices. And so when we see here, we're seeing this, the conscious choice, say with Parissa, this is my friend, and now I don't want to lose that. So what do I do differently? You had to make a conscious decision and choice to change that. And then with the business, I'm doing this, but it's not, after a while, it's not fulfilling, checking those boxes, so to speak. So then once again, you make that pivotal move of, no, I'm going to go in and I'm going to own my own business and run my business and be successful in that aspect.
Right. In my particular case, I had started my business already,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and I wasn't, although I was busy while I was also a probation officer, I already went to school to get my criminal justice degree. I wanted to use it.
Mhm.
It's not like I finally decided, you know what? I'm tired of these difficult people who don't care about complying with what their agreement was. And my business is growing every year. So it's not like I was doing this and then I decided to dip into something else. So,
Well, and I think sometimes that's when I think people have the most success is, and I mean, particularly that's what we did. I worked for a company and then I started just gradually in my private practice. Then it's like, okay, I'm getting more in my private practice. So I need to not I need to not work for somebody else. So I think it's just those things. But I think that it sounds like you've learned a lot. And when you look back on your past, it's not with this thing of, oh, it was a crappy past or anything. It was, what did I learn from it? Who is the person I want to be? And it's a continuous journey.
well, to me, at the end of my day, even though I do consider myself successful, part of me being happy is not comparing what I have to what other people have,
Exactly.
because then I'm not going to be happy with what I've earned.
Right.
Because I'm thinking, well, geez, that house is bigger, or that
Mhm.
car is newer, or
Mhm.
whatever. So I don't compare what I have to friends who have more than me. I mean, good for you. I'm happy for you.
Well, and I think that's a place of happiness. And I think that that's a struggle for a lot of people sometimes. Lawrence, so happy you joined us because I do think that sometimes there has to be that thing of the male voice and to have that vulnerability and to share that vulnerability, I think then gives other men that opportunity as well. So thank you for that. And thank you for joining us.
I enjoyed it.
Thank
Good.
And thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And I hope someone is listening
Mhm.
and knows whatever their situation is, they don't have to stay there.
Exactly.
They don't have to always guard their heart
Exactly.
or prevent good people from coming in.
Mhm.
And that's the choice I made.
And I think that's the biggest thing. You don't have to stay there.
Yeah.
There's always room to change things up. And once again, always thank you for everybody who joins us. And you can always find us at
twogirlsinapod.com. We would love for you to subscribe, tell your friends about the episode. And we are also on Facebook and Instagram under Two Girls in a Pod Life's Journey. You can also find us on YouTube at Adventures of Two Girls in a Pod Life's Journey.
because we just want to be everywhere. No.
Yes. And you can find our podcast wherever you get your podcast.
Thank you for having me, lady.
Oh my God, you have to do all of this promotion and we do that. Anyway, thank you everybody. And we will be back next time. And we appreciate you and just extremely grateful for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.